Christie Garcia. Welcome to the conversation today.
Thanks, John, for having me.
It's a real pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from California. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. Today, we're going to be talking about your book, your book, Your Ego is Showing. I love the title, by the way. Uh,
Mhm.
you'll have a chance to really unpack that for us and share more about that with us as we go throughout our conversation. But really exploring what this means for our leadership and why ego and how ego is both a strength and a weakness, can be a weakness within our approach to interacting with others. And I think we often really talk about it as a weakness. Maybe we don't talk about it as a strength as much. But just like anything else, there's pros and cons, and sometimes anything in moderation can be good, anything in extremes can be bad, right? And so,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, that's really what we're going to be diving into and exploring together today. As we get started, I wanted to share Christie's bio with everybody. Christie Garcia, author of Your Ego is Showing How Ego Management Unlocks Authentic Confidence and Meaningful Success, is the founder and ego management expert at Mindful Choice. She is a seasoned leadership coach, speaker, skillful facilitator, and a distinguished contributor to Forbes Coaches Council. With a notable career spanning 2 decades, Garcia brings a wealth of expertise in the realms of sales, talent acquisition, leadership development, and ego management. Great background. Again, it's a pleasure to have you. Anything you would like to highlight about your own background, personal context before we dive on in?
I think the biggest thing is just I've been doing the ego management for the last 16 years, and I just love the topic so much and how it actually relates to everybody. Everybody's driven by it, and I think your audience today will really find it empowering to learn that, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just your ego, the good, the
Mm,
bad, and the ugly one.
yeah, awesome. Well, one of the first things I love to ask authors is why this book? Why now? Lots of books out there, gazillion books out there on leadership. I'm not sure about ego specifically, but lots of books out there, right? And we get flooded with content all the time. So writing a book is a real labor of love. It takes a piece of you, your heart and your soul, and it's a big long process. It's really tough work. So what was it about this that, just how and why did you feel this pull to get this book out here now?
It's such a good question because I had zero desire to be an author. Um, it was actually, I guess, 2 years ago now. It was right when the AI push started and ChatGPT was coming out. I was like, oh, here we go. I've been doing ego management and I feel like kind of niched it with the angle that I take more so than anyone else has. And so it is a very unique conversation, and people aren't having it. Again, the ego is being talked about in a very different way than how I've used it in my leadership academy. So basically, the book is a crash course of the Mindful Choice Leadership Academy that I've been running. It identifies the three egos that I have been talking about for the last, multiple decades. And I just knew with AI, if I don't get it in writing, it's no longer mine. Mindful Choice will no longer be the founder of it or the creator of it. So I think that was the final push for me. Ironically, writing the book, because I've been talking it so long, that was the easy part. It only took about 3 or 4 months to get it on paper. It was really the publishing side that takes forever. So the behind the scenes is where the real labor, the real patience, the real grit comes from. But we made it. We did it. It's here, and we're so excited about it. I'm really excited to share it with the world. It is a topic that has been changing a lot of lives. I've had the pleasure of working with over 1,500 leaders who've gone through the academy who have really been able to experience the transformation of ego management. And it is a game-changing topic. It is really the key to finding freedom, not just freedom of your finances and freedom of your, career or whatever. It's really freedom to your own self, your freedom to your self-sabotaging talk, your unconscious habits, your unintentional behaviors that you aren't even aware of. And I think once it brings light to those, it's so much easier to wake up and be proud of what you're doing, be proud of the work or the person you are. Look yourself in the eye at the end of the day and say, we're doing okay. I don't have to be stressed that I didn't get enough done yesterday or today. There's always tomorrow. And I think that's really my favorite part about this work. I had a client that I worked with, gosh, we were talking about it 8 or 9 years ago. And, she's the HR director for one of the big companies that I've had cohorts go through. And just the other day, she was mentioning that this work is something that's stuck with her. Like she's done a ton of leadership, work. Like you said, there's a million books out there. This is a different conversation. It's a different approach, and it really does make a difference if you wanted to. So that's why it's there, and hopefully people will find the same value in it. It's getting a lot of great feedback, a lot of great reviews, and I just think it's a new conversation for people to have instead of the old traditional leadership conversation around communication and effectiveness. It touches on all of that, but from an angle of your unconscious behaviors.
Yeah, let's double click on that, the unconscious behavior piece,
Mhm.
because I know that's something you talk a lot about.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, we've all experienced these unconscious behaviors, right? You're driving down the street, and all of a sudden you find yourself 15 minutes down the road.
Yes.
You have no recollection of, getting from point A to point B, right? So we all have those moments, or you brush your teeth and you don't even remember brushing them, but all of a sudden you're done. And like we have all these like rote things that we do, like all of a sudden we have done them and we don't remember doing them. So there's those types of unconscious things that we're doing all the time that I think it's easy to point to. But there's lots of other things
Yes.
that we're doing all the time as well. Could maybe talk about some of that and like how do we go about our day doing all of these things? And we like to think of ourselves, we have free will and we have all these like we make all these decisions, we're very conscious and deliberate and blah blah blah. Like, but unpack that for us.
Yes, I love that. I will say 100% of people come into my academies on the first day and say, "Yeah, I'm conscious. I'm totally intentional with my life." And you are, but you're not, right? And so, I mean, the science shows 95% of the time we're unconsciously going through the motions. And even if we feel like we're making a conscious and intentional choice, if I was to ask you to stop and say why,
Hmm.
most of the time you don't really know. You have to actually stop and think about it instead of saying, "Oh, this is exactly why," because you've already thought about it, right? And so
Yeah.
the unconscious things are reacting when someone says something that upsets you, with an emotional response instead of a logical response. An unconscious behavior is not raising your hand in a board meeting, but you have something to say, but you're scared that someone's going to judge you. An unconscious response is not delegating to your team members because you don't think people, because deep down underneath, you're scared that they're going to make you fail. An unconscious response could be not asking your boss for a raise because you are scared that they're going to reject you. It's everyday interactions, it's everyday communication, it's miscommunication, it's our body language that's unconscious and unintentional. It's the words and the tones that come out of our mouth that are unintentional and unconscious. And the reasons they're unintentional and conscious go way back to childhood. That's what I love about the egos. It really takes the wows of your whole life. When you start to recognize the ego, you start to recognize why you've done everything you've done over the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years of your life, because now it makes sense. You know exactly why you did it. And I think that's the fun part about ego management. It's a hard journey. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I'm gonna say, "Oh, here's ego management," and you are gonna find out all the good stuff about you. But it's enlightening, and without all the long-term work. I think that's what I love about this approach is it's quick and it's fast. If you want to learn it and you want to open your eyes, you're going to open them quickly and you're going to open them fastly if you're willing to see it. And that's really where there's power in not just the book, but the ongoing work of ego management. It does change things quickly.
Yeah, so what does that do for somebody as they start to like have this realization that, 95% of the time we're walking around, unconsciously making decisions or being influenced by things that we aren't fully realizing are
Mhm.
influencing how we're going about our day, how we're interacting with other people, how we're making the decisions that we're making. Because it's one thing for me to think I'm making a conscious decision, but if I'm unaware of like these unconscious biases going on behind, in the background, then I'm only partially making like a deliberate conscious decision, right? Because
Yep.
there's all these other influences impacting me. So like what like what does it do for somebody as they start to come to that realization, and like as they start to like proactively address the fact that it's just natural. It's like it's human. Like we all do that. Like our brains are wired that way. Like
Yeah.
if we had to like make a conscious decision on every single decision point that we faced every single day, we'd be in like cognitive overload. There's no possible way, right? So we come up with all these mental shortcuts. We were like evolutionarily primed that way, right?
Hmm.
Which is great in a lot of ways, but in other ways it's not. Like, and so we have to like proactively try to, address that.
Absolutely. None of us will ever be fully conscious 100% of the time. It's not realistic. We're human. Where this work is great is you're going to buy back time. The ego loves to keep you busy. So if you ever feel like you're just too busy, there's never enough time, there's never enough, hours in the day, at the end of the day, you're never productive enough. That's work. It wants you to have everything done yesterday. Everything is a priority. Everything needs to be done right now. You're the only one capable. So you're the only one capable of doing it really, really well. So you take on more than you should. You say yes when you want to say no. So you just buy back so much time when you recognize these unconscious habits that you're doing. One of the other things that I love about it is that you start to just feel at peace. I know the inner peace is such a hokey word and a fluffy word because really in the past, no one really understood what that meant. It just means like, oh yeah, have balance, have peace, have balance. That doesn't really make sense. But legitimately, when you start to hear the self-talk that you have all day long, you start to eventually feel balanced because you're like, I don't need to have that conversation with myself anymore. I already know what I want. I already know what I need to do. And now I'm going to do it. Instead of having this conversation for weeks or months or years about what you should do, but you don't want to do it because you're scared of someone's reaction because you think you're going to upset them, or maybe it's not going to lead you to what you want. And so you go in these circles. The ego is drama. The ego creates drama. It wastes so much of our time overthinking, reacting and not thinking at all. It likes to keep us in the chaos. It likes to keep us in the status quo. It likes to keep us in these patterns that are unhealthy, but they feel comfortable. And so when we can start to be more conscious of them, we actually start to feel more confident. I like to say authentically confident because some egos come across as confident, but really they're focused on or they're motivated by an insecurity. And so feeling authentically confident, buying back time, speaking your truth, asking the world for what you want, no longer expecting others to read your mind. Those are all side effects of learning this work.
Yeah, and let's double click on what you just said too, because I think there's this misconception, you know, like you said, there's different, people talk about ego and there's different ways it gets talked about. And I think a lot of times when people think about ego, they think about, um, it's either a complete negative,
Hmm.
or they think about how I need to always portray myself as strong. I need to always portray myself as knowledgeable, kind of this fallacy of leadership,
Yes.
like the great man kind of model of leadership, um, kind of an approach, like this old fashioned kind of way of thinking about leadership and the ego kind of connected to that. Um, I just think that's such a kind of a false dichotomy and a false way of approaching the ego and approaching leadership. But you approach it totally differently. And there's again this, just like anything else, there can be weaknesses and strengths
Yeah,
associated with any characteristic, associated with any sort of trait. And the ego isn't necessarily good or bad. It just is. It just is like part of you, right?
right.
So like talk us through that. And if a leader, you know, is has all this vibrato about them, a lot of times you say, oh, they're arrogant, they have a big ego. That's not really the same thing of what like you're talking about, right?
Correct. Yes, we have always pegged the ego as the loud, arrogant, abrasive person in the room, the narcissist.
Yeah.
I actually look at it as the quiet, passive person in the room is just as egomanic as the loud, aggressive one. The only difference is we actually know where the loud, aggressive one stands, which is
Right.
actually healthier because we know, like, okay, they're angry right now. Where the quiet passive one, they'll have a smile on their face and be like, no, I'm fine. Everything's okay. That's actually a scarier ego than the loud aggressive one, right? Energy wise, the loud aggressive one comes across as scarier and wrong. But the quiet passive one is the one that's actually more dangerous because no one understands where they are. And when they finally flip, it's like, whoa, what just happened? And so those are the different ego types. We've got the complier, which is the quiet, passive, kind, loving person. And then you've got the controller, which typically is more, um, results oriented, wants to get to the finish line. They need to be the best. They need to win. They don't have any emotional attachment, so everything is just truth. Then you have the protector, which is all about values and black and white, my way or the highway. But they're also very loving and very high integrity. And so when you start to see how each ego is working, that's when you get to see where are the strengths. Ideally, we want to use all three egos. When we use the complier ego at its strength, which I like to think about as about 33% of using that ego type, is you're getting the compassion, you're getting the people concern, you're caring, you're thoughtful, you're a team player. Then you're getting the protector, which is you're going to do the right thing, whether it's hard or whether it's not. You're going to lead with integrity. You're going to stand by your values. You're going to speak truth, even if it doesn't serve you, because you know what's right for everybody else. When you're using your controller at 33%, you're getting results. You can see it. You're motivating, you're charismatic, you have a lot of passion, a lot of drive, so you have energy that can move the boat. And so again, all three of those together makes you a very well-rounded leader. That is your best self, your most authentic self. And when you can tap into that, that is where that inner peace comes from. Because really, you've got to own the ugly side of all of those egos in order to balance it out. Because most likely you're living in a one or two dominant egos. For example, I'm a controller protector. So I can be very intense. I can get on a soapbox. I can be incredibly stubborn. I can kind of be a jerk sometimes. And so if I don't own that side of me, then I can't balance it out. And I think that's when we really have to start to pull. So for me to balance out my controller protector, I have to pull from my complier to remember to care about the people because otherwise I'm all driven in task and facts and logic and the people don't really matter. And so to be able to pull all three, that balances out the emotional side of my masculine leadership. Um, and so I think everybody has to figure out where are they at currently? What are those strengths? If you think about productive communication, that's a great gift. Productive communication overused can be lecturing, over communicating, thinking your opinion matters when it doesn't, right? Micromanaging with language. And so knowing again, where are you using your gift as a strength? Where are you underusing it? Where are you overusing it? For a complier, being kind and friendly and generous with your time, that's a great gift. If you overuse it, you're overcommitting. You're saying yes when you need to say no. You are completely maxed out. And so again, knowing the balances, that's really where the ego balance comes from and why it's so important. So yeah, the loud, arrogant person in the room, that's kind of a model in my idea of what an ego is. I think it's playing on all of them. Everybody has one. Not knowing about it is the most dangerous part.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone has one. As you were just describing those, I'm like, I can definitely see myself in each of them. Like
Yes.
there's pieces of us in all of them, right? And sometimes perhaps a different context, a piece of me might come out more than another in a different context, or, I might feel more comfortable, with a piece of my ego in a different situation or whatever. How do you yeah, how do you approach that? Like if you know that you're more of that, that kind of type A controlling type of an ego, and you're fully aware of it, right?
Hmm.
Part of it is you can surround yourself, have complementary people on your team to kind of balance you out. That's a good way, I suppose, you can go about doing that. But you want to, be aware of that too, so that you can balance yourself.
Yeah.
Um, how do you go about coaching folks, to do that?
That's what I love about this work is It really just becomes a self-awareness and ownership component, right? If you can see, so a lot of people know their ugly side. A lot of new people know at a surface level, yeah, I can be a jerk sometimes. Yeah, I don't always care about the people's feelings. Or yeah, I overcommit, or I say yes when I really should say no, or I don't delegate enough. So a lot of people can surface level identify their weaknesses. I think what happens in this, when we go deeper, you then have to take ownership of that self-awareness. And that awareness becomes more specific, right? Okay, so what's the consequences of being too direct? Well, you shut people down, you don't hear people's opinions, no one brings the truth to you. Okay, that's a bigger problem than I'm too direct. And so when you start to break down the impact of what the ego does, now you actually want to change it. And I think that's always the missing component when you think about a lot of leadership development programs is they never get to the root of why. Why do I need to change? Because this has worked for me. When you think about most people are successful going through a leadership program, they have gotten to a place where they get to call
Yeah.
themselves a leader. And
Yeah.
whatever they're doing works to some degree. And that's what I always tell people. You can keep doing exactly what you're doing today. But if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling you're not doing a good enough job, if you're still chasing a ghost to prove your worth and value, if you feel exhausted and worn out at the end of the day, your ego is running your leadership. Um, if you don't want to feel that way anymore, do this work. Otherwise, you can keep doing what you're doing and be fine and wake up one day and say, ah, yeah, I did a good enough job. Um, and so I think that's where this work is different, is taking it to that level of ownership. Once you own it, then you can start to say, what do I want to do differently? I love that you identified different situations, topics, and people bring up different ego types because really that's the truth of the reality. When one ego shows up, they all show up. If you walk in a room and someone is very high protector, people are going to either react in a very high protector way or they're going to shut down. And so, knowing which egos are in the room, that's what makes this work so powerful. You not only learn how to manage your own ego, you learn how to manage other people's egos. So, you can change the dynamic of an entire room by recognizing which egos are at play. By using language. So, when you're talking to a complier, they need to hear why does this matter to the people. When you're talking to a controller, they want to know how do we get results? I don't really care about the people. And when you're talking to a protector, they want to know what are the facts? Why is this fair? Why do we need to do this? What's the logical reason that's going to get us from point A to point B, and why is it? How do we get to be right? And so I think when you start to understand the language people need to hear, it just becomes a lot easier, not just for you to lead as a leader, but for you to be present in that room. Um, the other, fun thing about this work, I think when it comes back to hiring the right team members, yes, you want to balance out your team. You don't want to hire a bunch of everybody like you, right? If you hire a team of compliers, everybody's going to be really fun. You're going to have super cool culture, really friendly, but there's not going to be a whole lot of ambition and results being achieved in that quick, fast-paced mode. Not saying they won't get results, but it's going to be more of the human culture that they're focused on versus the tasks. Vice versa, if you have just a whole bunch of controllers, yes, you're going to have incredible results, but you're not going to have a whole lot of loyalty and people committed because once they hit the achievement that they want, they move on to the next big task or challenge. And so I think having that balance is key. But as a leader, if you're not learning to talk to the other, across the aisle to the different ego types, that's when you start to have friction on your team members. I guarantee that the people that you have the hardest time talking to are either the same ego type as you, or they're the exact opposite ego as yourself. And usually, if they're the same as you, you guys, you'll jive until you don't, and then you'll hit heads. Once you hit heads, then it's really hard to get back on the same page. If you're opposite, you kind of never feel like you jive because you're just like, I don't know. The employee usually is like, I think they like me, but I'm not really sure. The boss is like, I just really don't know how to connect with them. They don't have enough ambition for me. They're not, they're just not accountable or whatever the language is. And so I think that's where it's really important to learn the different ego types so you can have a very functional, balanced team. And then everybody does complement each other.
Yeah, I love that. And I love also just pointing out, and it's the same thing whether you're talking about, we have all the different personality types and styles. Um, you have like strengths finders, you have all these different ways of thinking about how people show up in the
Mhm.
workplace. And it's just important know, because it's not necessarily right or wrong. It's not necessarily good or bad. It's just different. Like people are just different and they show up differently. And when
Mhm.
you can just understand that and know, then you have a better chance of working productively and effectively with people who show up differently, right? And
Right.
same thing with these ego types. Like for one, like you said, everyone tends to show up at times with these different ego types being predominant. And so just kind of being able to recognize them and to know when it's happening with you or with other people around you, you're in a better situation, better able to like deal with that context and that situation. But you just you become a better communicator, become a better collaborator, you become just a better team member because of your awareness, right? Because of
Absolutely.
your yeah, you're just it's a piece of that emotional intelligence. That when someone has that level of awareness, they just are in tune to people around them in a way that a lot of folks aren't. Um,
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing too with egos is once you're aware of them, nothing's personal anymore because you start to realize like, oh, that's their stuff. Oh, Sally's being
so
ultra
important. Yeah.
sensitive today. Something must be wrong with her. Let's go check in on her versus, oh, Sally's having a bad day. Like, let's avoid her like the plague. And I think a lot of times that's what happens is we see somebody off, good, bad, or ugly, and we kind of just avoid it. Or we ignore it. We act like it's not happening. And the reality is when we start to become in tune with, again, the why. Why is someone behaving that way? And getting curious there. Now you just brought the human back to business. You just brought human conversation. You don't have to get into all the personal details. If you're a protector and a controller, you're like, I don't care. I don't want to know. Um, you don't have to know the details, but just by having a conversation saying, hey, Sally, you seem a little off today. Is everything okay? Do you need anything extra from me today? That simple statement allows Sally to recognize her impact is impacting the space, so she has a choice to change it, or she could say, it is a really bad day today. I'm gonna just need some time, and I'm sorry if I come across a little edgy, right? Because now you just opened up a conversation that allows her to say that permission to say, I see you, um, thank you. And so I think that's where the human element gets missed in leadership so often. We override. Same at home. We try to avoid drama so much by avoiding the emotional responses of people. So we make these assumptions that the ego loves to make assumptions. How are they going to respond? They're going to be angry. They're going to be upset. I don't want to deal with the drama. And the reality is when we ignore it, there's way more drama. When we put things off, there's way more drama. When we react and assume someone's going to react one way, there's going to always be more drama. You always have to clean up a mess. There's always going to be miscommunication when the ego assumes that they know how someone else is going to react.
And honestly, even if you end up being right, like just the act of assuming, even if you were correct, like even if they
Mhm.
did respond the way you thought, because you went through the act of assuming, there's just something about that is just, yeah, yeah, nobody likes that. Nobody likes you to assume things about them. And so, yeah, it's just such an important thing. Um, Christy, this has just been so fascinating for me. I know we've
Thank
only
you.
scratched the surface, but you have a wonderful book that people can get and turn to learn far more about this, or they can reach out to you
Yes.
to work with you to learn far more. As we wrap up, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, how they can find the book, and then give us the final word for today.
Well, thank you again for having me. This was a pleasure. I hope your audience enjoyed it as well. You can find the book Ego. Actually, I'll show you the cover. It's so pretty. Your ego is showing, and it really is finding the, ego management. It helps you find meaningful success in life. And so I highly encourage it. You can get it at any bookstore on the market. You can also find more information about the book at mindfulchoiceacademy.com/book. Again, mindfulchoiceacademy.com/book. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Christie Garcia. And yes, I would love to just engage in any conversation. You have questions about the ego, please reach out. This is my favorite topic to discuss, and it is life-changing for everybody. So I learn from every conversation that I still have, and the ego doesn't go away, so you might as well learn about it.
Awesome. Christie, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Christie can do for you. Check out the book. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.